might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that. Well, give me all you got and don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine. No offense to you, don't waste your time. Here's why. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Hey, go. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. The love is too high to bring me down. Can't none bring me down. I said, take now. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. The love is too high to bring me down. Can't none bring me down. I said, because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Hey, go. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. The love is too high to bring me down. Can't none bring me down. I said, because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Hey, hey, hey. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Hey, hey. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do.
Welcome to VidDevoChurch. By way of announcements, behold, the sun's rising. This is probably the first time in about a year, because we're almost approaching our 1 year here at VidDevoChurch, Utah's only all outdoor church, that I've actually gotten here and started recording about the same time as the sun rises over the Wasatch Mountain Range. Because you see, that's what we want to do. That's what we've been trying to do. That's what we've sought to do since we started VidDevoChurch, is to be there when the sun rises and joy comes in the morning. Because some people may get together on Easter Sunday for a sunrise service, but every day that the Lord has made for me is a sunrise. You know, S-O-N, not just S-U-N. because I enjoy the day the Lord has made. According to the Bible, according to the Word of God, every day the Lord causes the sun to shine and the rain to fall, the snow and the seasons. All these things are there for a reason, but He's caused them to come upon the wicked and the good. So, if God does so involve Himself in the affairs of man, I want to be aware of what God is doing every day. Not just Sunday, but Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And ain't it grand to be a Christian? Ain't it grand? To throw back to the Jesus movement, which that song probably came from a denomination, but you get the picture. I get winded easy, so you may have to bear with me when I pause for a long time, because I'm still recovering from a hospital surgery where they had to cut me open and kind of like clean me out and sew me up and put me back together again. You know, kind of like the Tin Man with a heart. Oh well. But even so saying, God gives us the ability to do that which we could not do, so that we can do what God has called us to do. Because when God is called, He's also equipped. When God has given you that capability, He gives you the spiritual ability by trusting in Him with all your heart. When you lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge Him, He does direct your path. That is something that every day we should seek to find what God may say to us, so that He can direct us rather than we be self-motivated, self-directed, selfish. Ish is an interesting word. It means man in Hebrew. Ish and Isha is what Adam and Eve were called. So whenever you put the word selfish, you kind of put self-made man there, and you got the idea of what God doesn't want for us. God created man in His own image. So ever since then, we have been seeking to fulfill our destiny by looking at the wrong image. We oftentimes create for ourselves what we think we want to be, as opposed to what God has created us to be. We all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Each and every one of us. Not one of us have sought the Lord. Each of us have gone our own way. We have gone astray. We have sought to do those things that we think we ought to do in the way we want to do them. So according to God, we're not doing what God would have us to do. Jesus came and was born of a woman, born of a virgin. He came from heaven down to earth, not to do His will, but to do the will of Him who sent Him. And the will of Him who sent Him was our Father which art in heaven. Hallowed be His name. But Jesus came and said, look, I understand what you think you should do, but I got news for you. I want to tell you what you ought to do. And frankly, we thought we knew what we were doing if you're Jewish, because the Jewish nation was pretty confident they were, and still are, the chosen people. They were so confident of that they put their trust in their religious ideas over trust in the Lord. So we like to say here at VidDevoChurch, whatsoever it is the Lord tells you to do, trust Him, but don't trust men. Because God is the one who's directing you. It should be that the Word of God, by the Spirit of God, to the people of God, of the Son of God, Jesus, is that with which you put your stock and trade in. That is who He is, the way, the truth, and the life. Now some people argue and say, well, yeah, but that's your interpretation of Jesus. No. Got news for you. The revelation of Jesus Christ is written in the Bible. That is who He is. The book and the last book of the Bible is called the Revelation of Jesus Christ. You want to know about Jesus? Then all you need do is go to the end of the book and read about Him who was at the beginning of the book. Jesus said Himself, you do search the Scriptures, and in them you think you have eternal life. But those are they which speak of me. Since that's which that is which speaks of Jesus, I think we need to remember what Jesus says, because today we're going to talk about the law came from Moses, but grace and truth has come from Jesus Christ. And that's found in John 1:17, which we'll look up in a minute. But as an overview, what we're going to be talking about is what man thinks he should do as opposed to what God says to do. Because oftentimes, even like in the law of Moses, we see a pattern of that with which sounds good, looks good, even causes us to act good. But we're not good enough. You see, that's the difference between the law of Moses and grace that we need, because we can't be good enough. We never will be good enough. We can't make ourselves good so that God would accept us by our own works of righteousness. For it's not according to works of righteousness which we have done, but according to His mercy He saved us. You see, part of grace is mercy. Part of grace is love. Part of grace is giving to us what God intended for us from the beginning, and that is to have fellowship with us. Because sin had separated us from God, there was no way for us to have that direct oneness or intercommunication with God, that intervention by God in our lives in such a way that we could see and know God and have a personal relationship. So in order to have that personal relationship that God intended from the beginning, when we disobeyed and sacrificed that relationship, Jesus came to restore that with which we had lost, that with which every son of Eve that was born of a woman did not have when they are born. For we are born in sin, conceived in sin, and die in sin. But Jesus, when He came, said something unique and different than what the law of Moses told us to be and to do. He said, you must be born again. For that which is born of the flesh is flesh. Of course, that's obvious. But that which is born of the Spirit, whoa, what do you mean Spirit? You don't know what the Spirit is? You who are a teacher of Israel? As He told Nicodemus. I got news for you. Today we got people that are always talking about the Spirit, but sometimes they're not talking about the flesh. Sometimes they're not doing what they say they believe in. And oftentimes Christians are called hypocrites for the fact that they don't always live out what it is that God said we're to be about. And we'll talk about that. But today, as the Lord has caused the sun to rise, we want to remember that around the world, whether you accept it or not, on a Sunday, you got Christians meeting together. You got Christians assembling together in places they call church, which is good. Church is for those that are called out. Church is for those that are separated. The church is for those that are learning. Church is for a lot of reasons that people talk about today. But what God gave the church for is for us to give back to Him, sometimes worship, sometimes praise, but also our lives, to rededicate ourselves daily unto Him, so that we can learn once a week or twice a week or even every day of the week what it is that we ought to do, what we should do, and what God wants us to do. So here at VidDevoChurch, we like to do it the way Jesus said. You know, free, you receive, free, give. You don't have anything you can give us, but we have something to give you. And that with which we do is to give to you that hope that lies within us, that answer and that testimony of the truth that lies every man could know if he would but simply turn his eyes unto God and seek to know Him in a personal and intimate way. The only way that you can do that is through Jesus Christ. For, as we're going to read, and we'll open it now and look in our Bible at John chapter 1, verse 17. So if you have a Bible, why don't you get it? As I catch my breath. When you drop 20 pounds in a short period of time, you have very little stamina. We're looking in John chapter 1, John being that disciple that John declares by himself hey, I'm the one Jesus loved. And that's how he wrote it. Now, I think about the time he wrote it, the other disciples were probably long gone. I don't think they would let him get away with it. John was typical of you and I. He wasn't somebody that was like, oh, well, I'm special. But he probably was a little carnal and say, the disciple Jesus loved. Now, it may be true that he was. Maybe true that he wasn't. Maybe true that he was intimate. Maybe true that he had a handle on it. But he was given a promise that he would not die, but that he would see the kingdom of God. And when he was on Patmos, after having tried to bend, after his enemies, you name it, about everybody tried to kill him at one point in time, but after they tried to kill John, they banished him to the Isle of Patmos, thinking that the very nature of how that island was as a prison would wipe him out and kill him off. Well, he survived. And as he did, God gave him a vision of the kingdom of heaven. He took him, as it were, on the Lord's Day into heaven. And we have the book of Revelation because of John. So in a lot of ways, I'd say, yeah, Jesus loved John. But just like Mom loved you best, I don't know about the rest of what John says. But I do believe that Jesus loved John, just like he loves you. So in John chapter 1, verse 17, it says, for the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. Now it's interesting because this is John. This is talking about what he knew that Jesus taught, what he knew that Jesus brought, what he knew that Jesus said, what we can be and know and have read, that with which God has said to us in this, the day that the Lord has made. And we know God is speaking to us today so that we would understand that this is what Jesus would speak to you today so that you could understand that the law was given by Moses. Now, you might argue with that. You might say, well, not for me, that's Jewish law. Well, yeah, it was. You see, the law of Moses was given for those that were going to follow that with which God brought them out of Egypt to save them. You see, God said, I'm going to save you. Moses says, okay, I'll go down and do it. So he went down there and in his own will, in his own way, tried to save the children of Israel. First thing he did, he saw those that were under persecution, those that were involved in sin, those that were literally in slavery. And he saw a master beating his slave, so he struck the master. He used violent means to try to accomplish God's purpose. And he killed that man. You could say his cause was just. You could say that he was righteous in his anger. You could say that he had a holy war to commit because God had told him he would be the deliverer. And yet, God tells him later that he misrepresented God. And so you see, the children of Israel knew that. They looked at him and said, well, what are you going to do? Kill Pharaoh? Are you going to kill off all these people to deliver the children of Israel? And he was humiliated. He was embarrassed. He was so distraught that he left. And for 40 years, God had to deal with him. Because in his pride from Egypt, in his arrogance for violence, in his way of being influenced by Pharaoh's court, he thought if he just had a gun, he could deliver the children of Israel. He thought if he just had his own way about him, being strong of arm, being mighty in the wisdom of Pharaoh's court, that he could deliver the children of Israel by an assault weapon. He thought that, because Pharaoh was such an ISIS-driven kind of guy, that he would deliver the children of Israel because God told him to. Well, that's kind of like what you and I do today, isn't it? Or like maybe you do, but I won't. Because you see, there's many that will choose to use the world and its ways to try to do what God has to say. It didn't work for Moses. Matter of fact, it postponed the deliverance of the children of Israel for 40 years while Moses had to get his act together. Moses turned his back on God? Probably. Moses decided that that wasn't his calling? Probably. Moses decided that, hey, you know what? Maybe I didn't hear from God. Maybe I was wrong about God. Maybe I didn't know God. Maybe I wasn't as intimate as I thought I was. And maybe he wasn't. But 40 years later, after some wisdom had come unto Moses, Moses looks on this mountaintop and says, now wait a minute, that's where God is? I thought God was in my heart. I thought God was, kind of this voice that I heard. I thought God was what I could read or what I learned in Pharaoh's court. That the children of Israel are God's chosen people, so I need to deliver them because God had told me to. Well, he looks up on that mountaintop and he sees something that doesn't make much sense. We know by the record, by the personal testimony that Moses gives, that he saw a burning bush. He went up the mountaintop because legends had it. The tribesmen knew it. People said that God was on that mountain. So because Moses had 40 years earlier an issue with the whole idea of God, he decided to go up the mountaintop to see what is this that was supposed to be where God dwelt. Moses goes up the mountain. Kind of like what we have to do at some point in time with our life. We got to go up the mountain and get alone with God. So Moses does that after 40 years, and he comes to a burning bush, and first thing God says to him, take off your shoes. Well, wait a minute. This is a burning desert. This is freezing cold at night. You're telling me to take off my shoes? Take off your sandals, for you're walking on holy ground. Wow. Whoa. That took Moses back. Suddenly he realized that this is something he doesn't know. Someone he doesn't understand, and something that's going beyond his comprehension. So he follows along with what God has said, and he talks to God, and he has a debate at times with God. He has a question about what God is saying. He doesn't understand the way that God is going to deliver the children of Israel. He has it in his mind that somehow, that one way or another, he's going to be that strong man, because even in the last moment of his life, when he did not enter into the promised land, Moses had gotten angry at the children of Israel, and those were the ones that God had died for. And God told Moses, you're not entering the promised land. You will not enter because you misrepresented me. Now, Moses had already represented God as the God of miracles. He delivered the children of Israel. He represented God as parting the Red Sea. They walked on dry land. He represented God as having mercy on Pharaoh up to a point, until Pharaoh hardened his heart. He had a showdown, as it were, with the priests of Egypt, with those that were following false gods. As a matter of fact, you would say that Moses did everything right according to religion. But there was one thing he did wrong. And what he did wrong was what he misrepresented God as at the end of his life. And that leads me to a question from John chapter 1, verse 17. The law came by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. Are you misrepresenting God? I wonder. Do you find yourself like Moses, wanting to do things for God in your own strength? Do you find yourself sometimes looking at your hands and saying, hey, I'm a bodybuilder, man. I could snap that guy's neck. Put me in the army. I'll be, for God, his righteous warrior, his soldier of fortune, his military Christian, his violent man. After all, isn't that what God did in the Old Testament? Isn't that what God chose to do with Gideon or some of these others? I'd take a second look at how he started. Even with David, did he start with a man that was strong, or did he start with a shepherd? Kind of interesting, huh? If you think about David, you can see something interesting about when he won and when he lost. When he had to act stupid and crazy, and when he had to act like God was with him. If you look at any of what God had done with different men, it wasn't about their strength, was it? But it was about their obedience of what God had said to do. It's kind of fascinating when you look at Joshua, the same thing. His battles weren't won because he had the army. The battles were won because he sent the priests forward to take down the wall. So, I understand if you're a born-again Christian today, I understand that if you're a religious person today, you want to look at ISIS, or you want to look at political systems, you want to look at your neighbor, or you want to look at, those guys and say, that's wrong. I want a gun. I'm packing. Really? What are you packing? According to what we used to say in the old days of the Jesus movement, if you ain't packing this, then you're defenseless. So it better be in your heart, because if it ain't in your mind, and it's not coming out of your mouth. So you really can't take a gun to a spiritual battle, and you wrestle not against flesh and blood, so what are you wrestling against? Who are you fighting? What really is the battlefield, and what really is the battle? You see, the battle belongs to the Lord, and unfortunately we sing the song, but we don't mean the song. A lot of people I know will say that song and go, well, yeah, the battle belongs to the Lord, but he gives us the strength to win. Maybe. Is that what Jesus said? Because you see, our text today is in John chapter 1, verse 17. The law came from Moses, or the law was given by Moses. There's a lot in the law that God directly says, like the Ten Commandments. There's an old joke, by the way, that says, yeah, you know that Moses, he gave us the law. And I say, yeah, Moses went up the mountain. God said 10 commandments, and Moses says, that ain't going to work. He says, what do you mean? He says, they need more. They ain't got to listen to 10 commandments. They need 613. It's an old joke that's Jewish, but you get the picture. With Gentiles, we'd have to triple that number, but the point being is that the old joke is simply that man can't go by 10 commandments. Man won't go by one commandment. Man won't live by the greatest commandment that Jesus said will fulfill all the law. To love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Who is my neighbor? According to what Cain said about Abel. And Cain, trying to pawn that off on God, God looks at him and says, I don't know, you just killed your neighbor, didn't you? So the reality of what the law is when Moses gave the law was simply this. We have Jesus saying, you have heard it said. We have Jesus saying, it has been written. You have a lot of what God is speaking to each and every one of us about the law of Moses, and I got news for you. There's a lot of greatness that's in the law of Moses. There is what some people like to say nowadays, well, we don't follow the law of Moses because he has some of the ritual law, for those that are Levites. We're not Levites. Okay. We don't follow the law of Moses that is the, observant law, or, they like to say that it's some kind of breakdown of different parts of the law. So they try to say, well, we don't go by that law, we go by this law. We don't go by that law, we go by this law. I got news for you. If you even go by one law, you're guilty of all the law. And I don't mean the law of Moses, I mean any law. And we're told to obey the law. Jesus said he didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And fulfilling the law doesn't mean that he gets rid of it and that you shouldn't do it, but it's a light, it's a guide, it's something that shows us something that we need to know. It shows us what God requires of us, what God wants of us, what God inspects us for. Grace doesn't negate the law. Grace fulfills the law. Yeah, it really does. So does that mean we become a bunch of legalists? No, not at all. Because if you balance it and you go and look and see what it says, if you try to obey the law or to fulfill the law, you can't. For there is a nature at work within you that causes you to sin. A nature at work within you that you cannot stop sinning until the day that you get rid of this sinful nature that's within you. And that will be when this flesh dies. Because even though you must crucify yourself, take up your cross and follow Jesus, so that your flesh is no longer in control, but God is, you still will sin. But He's faithful and just to forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness if we confess our sins. So the law of Moses isn't just simply an idea that, well, the law was given to show us what we can't do, and then grace was given to us to show what God has done. That sounds good. It looks good. It feels good. Boy, I'm glad I don't have to do that law. Matter of fact, I question whether or not it's good or not, until I get into the book of Revelation, when it says that the children of Israel will move back into the land and inherit for 1,000 years a kingdom. Now I wonder what God's going to use as a methodology of ruling over the nations, that the children of Israel, the children that have been delivered from the world, that have known the law of Moses, what are they going to use for this idea of kind of teaching a society what they should do? Because you see, today you have a civil law. You know, the civil law, the law that says if you lie about someone, if you treat them with derogatory remarks, they can sue you at court. They can take you to court and sue the shirt off your back if you lie about it. We have the law of tort, the law of, I was going to say, contractual law. There we go, tort and contractual law. We have laws that say, hey, look, if you sign a document and you promise to do this and you don't do it, you can be fined or penalized whatever the contract says, or whatever the judgment of the judge who's going to evaluate that contract says is worth that with which you haven't done what you promised to do. Renting a house, getting a job, doing lots of things that you sign your name to, that you've shaken your hand, as it were, or said by your word that you would do. Even a verbal contract is held accountable to you. That's a law. As a matter of fact, if there wasn't a law, we couldn't be saved. Because after all, you didn't do what the requirements of the law told you to do, or the requirements of salvation. For it's not simply enough to say, hey, I believe in salvation, and I believe, in Jesus, but rather there's a contractual agreement that God is making with you. So you see, there's a difference between the law of Moses and the law of God. There's a difference between civil law and contractual law. There's a difference between the law of the land and the law that you believe in. A lot of people are arguing today that they want to change the law. And so they vote. They make up laws where they say, hey, I want to be able to do this. And so they make up a law that the Supreme Court of the land says that's not in keeping with the original document. That's not in keeping with what was intended by those who started this nation. And that's where we find ourselves today. People today want to argue, debate, change, and rearrange the law of the land to fit their own means and ways that they want to live their life. They want to change so they can smoke. They want to change so they can toke. They want to change so they can kill. They want to change the law to fit their own methodology of what they want to do. And when the majority votes, the Supreme Court has to come in and say, no, that's not good for the people. That's false for some reason. Jesus came, as we know in John 1:17, and brought grace and truth. Because you see, the truth is that God didn't negate the law, God fulfilled the law. God brought a way and a means with which we could understand why the law is good. Now somebody's going to go, wait a minute now, you're beginning to sound like a religious, legalist. Maybe I am. I'm sure I look like I got a kippah on, right? That I'm, got tzitzis, and I got a white, holy underwear, or I got shirts on, or, a little name badge. Those are religious laws. Or dare I say, those are dogmas and doctrines, not law. For that with which we're talking about, as far as being the law of Moses, Jesus had an interesting statement that he came with grace and truth and began to explain, him being a lawgiver, what he had told Moses when they were on the mountaintop. You see, Jesus was there when God spoke to Moses. Jesus was there when the children of Israel were standing at the foot of Mount Sinai and they were saying, hey, we don't want to be intimate with God. We do not want to be close to God. We don't want to get that close to a holy God who's full of fire and lightning and thunder and storms and the voice is terrifying. You go, Moses, and tell us what God has said. And so Moses, even though he had already learned his lesson, found out the hard way. The people don't want to do what God says. The people really don't want to be what God has said to be. As a matter of fact, while Moses was on the mountaintop, while God was telling him what the law of God was given to Moses, the people themselves were down sinning. And God said, look, Moses, I like the idea that you want to follow me. I like the idea that you want to know me. They have refused me. They have abused me. Now they're even sinning in front of me. I'm going to wipe them out. I'm going to destroy them. I'll start over with you. And Moses interceded on their behalf. Moses exercised the first example of grace that the children of Israel had to learn a hard lesson from. Grace came by one man, Moses. And he brought it to the children of Israel, lest there not be an Israeli nation today, lest there not be an Israel, which is why it's the law of Moses. Moses had every right, every privilege, and every ability to simply say, fine, God, let's you and I start over. Kind of like with Jonah. But you see, or Jonah, like Noah. But you see, that didn't work out so well either. But as we see what Moses does, he intercedes with God. He talks to him. He says, look, I know you know, but I would rather you spare them. I would rather you save them. I would rather, even though you give us this law, have mercy because you know the truth. You know what I was like, and yet you still used me to deliver the children of Israel 40 years later. I like that. I see how mankind today is the same way. Moses represents a lot of what you and I are like. We think we know what we're doing. We act like we know what we're doing. When it doesn't go our way, we get pissed off at who we're trying to talk to. We slam the rock. We chastise the people. We beat the servants. We yell at the church. We yell at the government. And God says, you're not entering the promised land. You will not see the promised land. Why? Because you misrepresented Jesus. Moses did misrepresent God to the people. But Moses is given a second chance. You see, Moses is coming back with Elijah, and those are the two prophets that are coming. Moses will come back and he will stand in Jerusalem and he will witness to the children of Israel and to the world, but he will witness mainly to the children of Israel of the law of Moses, because the children of Israel say there is no law, some of them today. The majority of Israel, the nation itself, says, hey, you know what? That law was just made up by man, and there was no real God, but rather, we acknowledge that's our history, so we go by our interpretation of what that man said, Moses. Well, God's going to confront them in their own sin. Fine. You don't believe in me? I will send you my prophet, Moses, and you will listen to him. Because you see, he sent his son and they didn't listen the first time. And in the end, God will still spare them, just like when Moses interceded on their behalf at the foot of Mount Sinai. After Moses and Elijah witnessed to the children of Israel, after the children of Israel are shoved into the valley of Megiddo, after they're about to be destroyed, here comes Jesus. Here comes Jesus. Because Jesus is our intercessor. Jesus makes intercession for us, the church, right now. But likewise, he has been promised to the children of Israel as their Moshiach, the one who is to come, who is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, who is not only the Son of Man who came the first time and died for the sins of the world, but he will come as the King of the Jews, even as he had that banner put over him when he died. He will come and deliver the children of Israel, but he will not bring the law of Moses. He will bring grace and truth. And they will look on him whom they have pierced, and they'll say, where did you receive these wounds? And he'll say, I've received them in the house of my brethren. And they'll know at that moment who he was, who he is. The fact that they too, likewise, like each and every one of us, killed Jesus. All of us. Not just Romans, not just Jews. Every single one of us. Because every one of us, when we go our own way, when we live the way we want to live, when we choose to do the things we want to do, we kill Jesus daily. We crucify him again. When we do not accept the reality of the knowledge that we must not do our will, but we must do the will of him who sent us, then we denigrate that with which God has said to do in his law and in his grace and in his truth by telling us, why do you call me Lord and you don't do the things I said? The fact that God the Father has given judgment over to Jesus means we better be listening to what Jesus has to say. So, later today we're going to talk about grace and truth. But we wanted to bring up this morning about the law of Moses. We wanted to show you how, on the one hand, the law of Moses is wrong, but on the other hand, it's right. For it does accomplish something, and it does tell us in a way we should live. The Mormons today often exercise a lot of the law of Moses. They interpret it in kind of an unusual way, but they do it, and they live out a lot of what the Mosaic law is. They call it, Pearl of Great Price, Doctrines and Covenants. I mean, you go on and on about their religious ideas, but they pattern it after basically Jewish customs and Jewish law. Today, Orthodox Jews do the same thing, but they also interpret and they come up with their own traditions. That's why they wear black. How sad that is, huh? But the point we were trying to make this morning, the reality of what the law of Moses is the fact that Moses went off on his own tangent and did that which was wrong in the sight of God. So God didn't honor him. Do you do the same? Have you, in some way today, gone off on a tangent and done it your way? Do you think you're going to waste away for 40 years waiting for God to do it his way? We're running out of time. We're lucky if we have 5 years left. We're running out of time because Jesus is coming again. We're running out of time because every day the Lord is speaking to each and every one of us, telling us to seek his way, not our way. Each and every one of us have the ability now, because Jesus has come, to talk direct to God. James 1:5 declares that if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who upbraideth not, but giveth to all men liberally. If you don't know God, ask him. If you need some kind of understanding about God, ask him. If you want to know who's doing what and where and when and why and how and what and every other question, you got to ask him. You don't wait till you get to heaven to try to figure out what's going on. God said, look, yeah, my ways aren't your ways, but I'll still answer you. I'll give you some kind of wisdom. But is it what you really want? Are you like the children of Israel, standing at the foot of Mount Sinai telling Moses, you go up. We don't want God that close. Are you rather wanting to follow a man and follow a religion than have direct and meaningful communication with God? Are you willing to go up the mountain and be like Moses, or go partway up like Joshua and wait? Or are you more like the children of Israel, ready to party with the world? Ready to go to your religious system and say, hey Aaron, I don't know where that Moses went, but we need a God. We need something now to keep the people together, to make them all come together on Sunday and have a worship service. We need something in order to bring everyone together so that they will at least celebrate, at least enjoy, at least employ their emotions in a devotion. That way we can, kind of deal with what we're going through, because we've just been delivered from Egypt. And who knows where Moses went? Who knows where the man of God is? But while he's gone, would you, because God said, or Moses said that you're to be, the one? Well, Aaron being a man of the people, Aaron being that good Christian leader, of course he said, well, I'll pray about it. Of course Aaron said, I'll think about it. Of course Aaron said, you know what? I don't think it's a good idea, but, maybe we could talk about it. It's not what Aaron did. Aaron being a type of religions of the world, being a type of the religious man, being a type of even Christian denominations and Christian religion and even evangelicals today, he said, bring me your gold. Bring me your money, honey. Bring me all the tithes and offerings into my storehouse, and I'll make you a God to worship. I'll show you what you can have. And so he fashioned with his hands and made by his own skill, by his own ability, a golden calf. And the people partied, and the people celebrated, and the people rejoiced, and the people worshipped. Now you can take that anywhere you want to today. You can apply it to everyone in your own way. As many as they that have ears to hear, let them hear what the Spirit of God says, and whatever He's telling you, you think about it. And then ask God about it. Because like I said, you need wisdom to understand that one. I can't tell you every single instance where that'll apply. But it does apply. So Moses, being up on the mountaintop, is told by God, hey, they're blowing it. They've got their worship service going full bore. They've got thousands of people assembled together, all worshiping together in one accord. They are one with the golden calf. They are one with what they took out of the world and used from the world in order to celebrate the world and to get back into the world with what they're doing from the world. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? I look about right now, and I'm standing here without really a sound system. Standing here, yeah, there's a camera, but, such as it is. And I look and I see how God has celebrated worship every day with, before the sun rises, that bird that sings every morning, you can hear it somewhere. With how He causes, that pre-dawn to light up, how He worships. That through the night, how you see the stars twinkling in the light. And then in the morning, you see the sunrise. That's how He worships. When Jesus said they that worship Him would worship Him in spirit and truth, He wasn't talking about sound systems. He wasn't talking about guitars. He wasn't talking even just about people. He was talking about how God is already receiving worship in heaven. If you look at the book of Revelation, you know there's already worship going on. Whether you participate with what God has done is up to you. See, your choice is to get involved with what God does as opposed to what man does. Aaron created an idol. Aaron created that which the people wanted and gave to them. Aaron did that which was not pleasing in the sight of God. The question I have for you today, for you to think about, in this, the day the Lord has made, what are you doing? Are you Moses, intimate with God, talking to God, bringing back from God that with which God wants for the children of Israel? Are you Moses interceding for the people, praying for them, saying, God, don't wipe them out, spare them? Or are you rather, wanting to destroy ISIS? Are you wanting to be like Moses 40 years earlier, killing the enemies of God? Are you wanting to go get a gun, sign up for the military, go overseas and kill in the name of a Christian nation, thinking that you're somehow sparing people and delivering them from that dirty ISIS kind of people? Those Muslims or whatever it is that you're going to fight against. Do you really think that's the way to deliver them? Violence, killing, violence. You really think that's the way you're going to change the world? I got news for you. One man has changed the world. One man didn't raise a fist or raise a rallying cry. One man was so gentle that we're told that a bruised reed he would not break and a smoking flax he would not quench. Don't tell me Jesus fought and whipped people in the temple. I got news for you. I'll bet that whip didn't touch one person. I bet it drove out the animals. I bet it drove cattle and birds and caused them to fly and be free. I'll bet the tables that were knocked over had a lot of people scrambling under them to find their money. What do you want to be? Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? In John chapter 1, verse 17, the law came by Moses. Do you want to be Moses at the beginning of his life? Do you want to be Moses at the end of his life, getting mad at the people? Do you want to be Moses up on the mountaintop? Do you want to be Aaron? Look at that whole scenario. Think about what you want to be. Because the answer isn't there. It's not in Moses at the end of his life because he's not done. God still requires of him something else he has yet to do and will be fulfilled in the future. That he still has to witness to those that he prayed they would be spared. And they will be humiliated by the message that Moses brings. So really, because we aren't the children of Israel, because we aren't standing at the mountaintop in Sinai in a desert, because we aren't in Egypt, or are we? When you've been delivered, who do you want to follow? Do you want to follow Aaron, or do you want to follow Moses, or do you want to go up the mountain? Do you want to have personal relationship with God? Because it will cost you like it did Moses. It might cost you your life. Or do you want to be something different? Do you want to be unique and distinctive? Do you want to call upon the name of the Lord and be saved and walk with Jesus today? You can. It's just that simple. Call. You know, kind of like, hey, call me. Call. It says very clearly in the Bible that they that call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. It doesn't say how or when or why. It took Moses 40 years to get his act together. Might take you 4 minutes. All you need to do is call. You start with God and you end with God. You begin with God and you finish with God. In John chapter 1:17, we're going to talk about it later today, what we finish with God is grace and truth. We start with the law of Moses, and it causes us some very interesting things. God spoke to Moses and said, deliver the children of Israel, so he tried, and he did it in his own strength and failed. Later, he delivered them, according to what God had told him to do. But in the end, he still had some lessons to learn. Do you still have to learn a few things? Are you still trying to use violent means to deliver the children of Israel, or deliver yourself, or deliver people? Are you trying to protect your family? Are you trying to go to a spiritual battle with carnal weapons? Are you, like Aaron, creating for yourself a God you can worship? Have you changed the image of the incorruptible God into the image of the corruptible man? A lot of questions for you to think about this morning. Because we're not giving you the answer. We're giving you the truth. You know the answer. But the question is, are you ready for the truth?
It seems like more and more people are understanding the truth that the idea of church was never meant to be a building or a service time, but that church really refers to people, and that we need to think about it more like family. Your family is a family regardless of whether you meet in a home or regardless of whether you have a reunion. They're always a family. And in the same way, the church is always the church. It was a church before they had a building. They had church before they had these formal gatherings. The church just means the followers of Jesus Christ. Now, while we may agree that the church is the followers of Jesus Christ, that doesn't mean we're all in agreement, because there's so much disagreement on what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. Just like we can distort the concept of fearing God, we can also distort the concept of following Jesus. And it's a pretty simple concept. I mean, Jesus says, follow me. And it's the first thing he said to his disciples, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Now, granted, he was talking to fishermen, and he was saying, look, okay, forget the fish for a second. Follow me, and I'm going to have you not just catch fish, I'm going to have you catch people. And it's the last thing that Jesus said to his disciples, too. He says, you know what, now, go and make disciples. Go and make these other followers of me and baptize them and teach them to obey everything I commanded you. So the first thing Jesus says to his disciples is, follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. Last thing he says is, go and make these disciples, these people who follow me. And in between those two statements, he spent a lifetime of showing them what it means to follow God, showing them what it means to make disciples or to fish for men. It's this idea of we get more and more people to come under the authority of God, to actually submit to him and live the way that God wants us to. And so he tells his disciples, he goes, follow me, and I'm going to teach you how to do this. He spends his whole life doing it. Then he goes, now go and do the same thing. Where it gets weird is that nowadays there are millions of people on this earth who call themselves followers of Jesus, but their lives look nothing like his. And they're not obeying the things that he called them to do. And yet in their hearts they're convinced they're followers. When we were kids, this was a lot easier. Remember when we were kids and we played that game, Follow the Leader? It's pretty easy, right? The leader pats his head, you pat your head. The leader pats his knee, you pat your knee. The leader flaps his wings. You just kind of follow and do whatever he does. It's weird, though, in the church we've done this weird thing where we go, well, the rules to follow Jesus are different than follow the leader. See, in follow Jesus, we don't actually have to do what he does. We just do it in our heart. It doesn't really make any sense. I mean, imagine a kid on a lounge chair playing follow the leader and going, yeah, I'm flapping my wings in my heart. You know, it just doesn't. Why does that work in church and not anywhere else? Look, when my daughter comes to me and I say, hey, go clean your room, she knows better. She's not going to come back a couple hours later and say, hey, Dad, I memorized what you said to me. You said, go clean your room. You know, what am I going to say? Oh, good job. That's what I wanted. No. And she's not going to come to me and say, Dad, I can say, go clean your room in Greek. Listen, that's not going to fly. And what if she says, you know what? My friends and I, we're going to gather together, and every week we're going to have a study, and we're going to figure out what it would look like if I cleaned my room. No, none of that's going to fly. Just go and clean it. She knows that. So why do we think that this type of thinking or this type of talk is going to work with Jesus? I mean, Jesus was as black and white as you get. He would look at people and he'd say, why do you call me Lord when you don't do what I say? He says that in Luke 6:46. Why do you call me Lord when you don't do what I ask you to do? I mean, why would you call someone your master and then not listen to him? And he says in Matthew 7:21, he goes, listen, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, is going to enter the kingdom of heaven. It's only the one who actually does the will of my Father who is in heaven. See, these words that we give without action behind it, that was never acceptable to Jesus. He says it's pretty simple. When I say follow me, you follow me. You do what I do. And when I ask you to do something, you just obey. One of the things I love about how Jesus teaches is that he's always completely honest. He doesn't hide anything. He just lays it all out there. Like when he told the people, hey, follow me, he explains to them how difficult it's going to be to follow him. He goes, listen, if you follow me, it's not going to be this life of luxury. In fact, I don't even know where I'm going to sleep tonight. And not only that, but people are going to hate you for following me. And not only that, but there's going to be all these temptations in the world, and you're going to have to fight all these things, and even your own family might be against you. If you follow me, you may end up getting crucified like I'm about to get crucified. See, sometimes we're not that honest with people. We try to talk people into following Jesus by just saying, hey, if you follow Jesus, you can be forgiven, you'll get to go to heaven, you can have intimacy with God, and all those things are true, but we neglect this other part that Jesus was very upfront with, saying, look, it's very, very difficult to follow me. There's a wide road, and most people are going to take this wide and easy road, but there's this narrow road that leads to life. And very few people will find it, and it's a hard path, he explains. But he also tells them, but I'm worth it. I am so worth it. The question of following Jesus maybe isn't so much about how do we follow Jesus, because I think that's obvious. How do you follow Jesus? Just do what he says. He says, feed the poor. Okay, go feed the poor. Love your enemies. Okay, I'll go love my enemies. You know, do good to those who hate you. Okay, if someone hates me, I'm going to do something good for. He explains, and so it's really not confusing how to follow Jesus. Maybe the question that most people struggle with is why. Why should I follow this Jesus then? If this road is so narrow and so difficult, then why should I follow him? And part of me goes, do we really need an answer to why? I mean, after all, isn't it just a little bit of a privilege and an honor that we get to follow the Creator? But if I'm perfectly honest, let me tell you why I decided to follow him. The reason why I decided to follow Jesus is because Jesus promised, he says, I am going to come back to that earth, and I'm going to come back someday, and I'm going to judge the earth. And when I read about his judgment, like when I read the book of Revelation, it's terrifying. And you have in Revelation 6, for example, you have these people who are really the biggest people on the earth. I mean, they're larger than life. You talk about the kings, the performers, the people we look at as just up on a pedestal, but you have them screaming and hiding in caves when Jesus starts to pour out his wrath on the earth. In fact, they're hoping that the rocks will come and crush them, because they're saying, someone hide us. Hide us from the wrath of this one who sits on the throne, and hide us from the wrath of the Lamb, because the day of his wrath has come, and who can stand it? Who's even heard about that phrase, the wrath of the Lamb? And when we talk about Jesus, we'd rather think of him as like a little lamb. We like to think of him as that guy with the long blonde feathered hair that's just petting sheep and playing with little kids, and so gentle. And yeah, there's that side of him, but understand, in the Bible, Jesus talks about hell more than he talks about heaven. Jesus explains that I'm a powerful being, and you want to be on my side. And so honestly, I follow Jesus because in some ways I think, what other choice do I have? In John chapter 6, Jesus said some really difficult words, and this is in front of thousands of people. Thousands of people are listening to Jesus, and when he's done teaching, everyone leaves except for 12. Everyone's leaving going, I can't take that message. I can't stomach that. And Jesus looks at the 12 who are left, and he just asks them a very simple question. He goes, you guys want to leave also? And Peter's answer was really profound and yet simple. He goes, where are we going to go? And he says, you have the keys to eternal life. I know your message is hard, but where are we going to go? You think you're out for this life that's so difficult, and you are, but you find out that there's actually blessing, and you actually find more peace in taking this hard road than going with this wide road that everyone else is going to go on. And Jesus says, just take this, follow me. And you start learning that all the things that he's saying let go of and walk away from, those are actually things that were going to destroy you anyways. Jesus says, if you're going to try to save your life, you're going to end up losing it. But if you lose your life for my sake, then you're going to find it. In other words, if you're going to try to hold on to all these things and try to save every bit of life and everything that brings you pleasure, he goes, you're going to end up losing your life that way. But if you would surrender to me, if you would just trust me, trust that I have something better, and let go of everything else, he goes, then you're really going to find life. I mean, think about it. You really think that Jesus needs anything from us? He's the creator. Jesus wants to give. He wants to bless. And in fact, when Peter says, Jesus, we gave everything up for you, Jesus quickly stops Peter and says, hold on. He goes, everything you gave up, you're going to end up being rewarded for it. I'm going to give you 100 times what you gave up. He goes, don't you understand this life of giving and serving other people? He goes, you're actually going to find blessing in it because it's more blessed to give than to receive. And so when you let go and you start surrendering those things and you start following Jesus, you realize that, wow, surrendering to him is actually a great thing. And as we surrender, it's the God of the universe who then humbles himself and says, yes, I'm your leader, but I'm going to serve you. I'm going to wash your feet. I'm going to die on a cross for you. I'm going to listen to your prayers. And in a sense, we've got God himself caring for us. There's a reason why Jesus says, follow me. It's not because he needs me. It's not because he needs anything that I have to offer. But he's telling me, follow me. Because this is the way that I'm going to lead you to a life that goes way beyond anything you could have ever come up with by yourself.
We have often asserted, and we affirm it yet again, that no fact in history is better attested than the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. It must not be denied by any who are willing to pay the slightest respect to the testimony of their fellow men. That Jesus, who died upon the cross and was buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, did literally rise again from the dead.
This is a celebration. We're calling out to every nation to spread the word that Jesus